Today we're making banana bread. This banana bread recipe is so amazing, and every time I teach students how to make it, they say, wow, I did not realize that banana bread could be so delicious. So let's get started. Here we have our ingredients. You can see that the bananas are really ripe. So the main thing to remember with banana bread is that you want to get your bananas as overripe as possible. You can even store them overripe, peeled in the freezer, and then have them ready to go when you are able to do your banana bread. That's what I do. And that's what we do in the baking pastry kitchens as well. And then you can see there's some dry ingredients here, sugar, eggs, vanilla, and stuff like that. The main thing that keeps these bananas, this banana bread super moist is the addition of the vegetable oil. You could also use canola oil, that's fine. Some people also like to use a combination of maybe coconut oil and vegetable oil or canola oil. Just make sure that you try your best to to ensure that the oil that you're using or the fat that you're using is neutral flavored. Because if you try to use something that's too strong in flavor, it'll impart in the finished product. So that's the key. Now the great thing about this recipe, you don't need a mixer at all. You just need a bowl and a whisk and some good elbow grease or just some elbow work for yourself. So here I'm peeling the overripe bananas that I have, and then in order to make sure I have enough product, I had some in the freezer as well. So you'll see me pour some of that in to make sure I have enough for the recipe. So there's the one that I had in the freezer. There's some additional liquid in there. That's fine, just put it all in. And so here I am mashing the banana with my whisk. You don't have to go and blend the banana or anything like that. If you wanted to make this in a mixer, you absolutely could, but it's really not necessary. I'm just trying to get these broken up so that it only has very small particles in the finished product. So you see here that I am just mixing it together to break it up further. And as I mix it, man, I can really smell the ripe banana here. The key is to make sure that you get your flavors naturally. Adding something like banana extract is really going to provide that horrible fake taste. So starting with ingredients that are going to coax as much of that natural flavor as possible, that is the key. So ensuring your bananas are super overripe, you'll get that caramelization, that kind of sugary sweetness from them, and that very strong banana flavor and natural essence. Okay, so now that our bananas are mashed up, I have put in my eggs into my sugar. I've also added the oil and the vanilla. And I just want to mix this up so that I can break up the eggs and get everything properly combined. Another thing to remember with banana bread is a lot of people, they judge the texture of the finished banana bread by how fluffy it is and how dense it is. The way to be able to really ensure that you don't get a super dense banana bread is to not overmix it. Now once you have the sugar and eggs mixed, then you can add the mashed banana here. And the main thing to remember is when you are adding the dry ingredients later on in the recipe, that's where you have to be super careful about overmixing and getting a dense finished cake. Because what happens is that you overactivate the gluten, and flour, wheat flour, has gluten in it. So if you overactivate gluten and you keep stirring and stirring and stirring, you'll end up with a very dense kind of hard cake. So now I'm sifting my dry ingredients. This is very important. See all these lumps here? If I didn't sift those and I was just mixing all of this into my wet mixture, I might have these little pockets of flour, maybe even pockets of leavener that I don't want. So it's important to make sure that you sift everything first before it goes in. And that's pretty much the case for all baking recipes, with the exception of breads and things like that, where you're really going to mix it and knead it hard, and that little pockets of flour will get broken up anyway. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my parchment paper and I'm going to add this dry ingredient mixture in slowly. So I'm adding some here, and then I'm going to actually go through the motion of gently folding the batter. And again, as I mentioned before, you want to make sure you're not over mixing, and this is a great technique in order to ensure you don't over mix. You do this folding. So I go slowly, I lift up the whisk, and I do this circular motion. And when I start to see that most of the dry ingredients have incorporated, then I can add my second addition for a total of 2 additions of dry ingredients. So now that I've added my second addition, I'm just finishing up the folding process. You see here that I don't have any pockets of flour or anything, and my mixture has thickened quite a bit from the addition of the dry. And so now I'm actually ready to put them in the prepared loaf pans. Now each student will receive a few of these disposable loaf pans to bake in, and it's really up to you if you want to spray them, but you don't have to, because you can actually serve the banana bread directly in these loaf pans. So this recipe here makes a traditional loaf pan, which is a large metal loaf pan. But I've decided to bake it in these smaller ones so you can see that there's different options. You can also use this banana bread recipe and bake it in a cake pan. You can bake it as little cupcakes or muffins if you want as well. So it's really versatile. It's just a batter, right? And so you can actually just put it in any vessel and it'll just change the shape of how it comes out. But this is more traditional to do it in a type of a loaf size. So you see here that I am doing an even distribution of the banana bread batter. And then once I've finished the distribution here, I'm actually going to garnish the top with a little bit of sugar in the raw. We also call this turbinado sugar. And that's going to create a beautiful crunchy texture on the top of our banana bread when it's finished baking. Now, if you don't have turbinado sugar, you can actually just use regular sugar. It just won't have that distinct crunch and then that kind of crystal looking beautiful top, which is okay too. So now we need to bake our banana bread at about 330 degrees Fahrenheit until a skewer or a toothpick comes out clean. And that ensures that there's no wet batter on the inside. If you need to rotate your banana bread maybe halfway through the process, then make sure that you do that. So after it's done, make sure that you let it cool completely, and you can see here that I have already tested it with the skewer and there's no wet batter here. And now I'm ready for it to be sliced. So again, you know, these loaf pans, you can serve them directly in these loaf pans, but since I want to show you how it looks like when it's cut, I'm just going to open one up and that way you can see. So I'm going to trim the side and loosen up everything. And man, this smells delicious as I am getting it off of this loaf pan. And the crunchy top, I can see that the crunchy top is beautiful and it'll create a beautiful contrasting texture to your finished product. See the bottom here? It's beautifully caramelized. The color is super important when you're baking. And a lot of novice bakers, when you're baking, you want to take it out when it's too blonde. And that's a very American thing to do. Unfortunately, that's a characteristic of a lot of baked goods in the United States. But if you do classical French baking, classical European baking, everything has a real deep caramelization there. And what a lot of US bakers don't realize is that that contributes to deep, round flavor, well rounded. So try to get that deep caramelization for the recipes that are appropriate to it. And you can see here in my finished cutting that everything is properly baked. There's no big pockets of flour. And once you eat a slice, it's really nice and fluffy, and that banana flavor is coming through beautifully. So you can also freeze this banana bread once it's baked for up to a month. That's fine. But I have a feeling that it's not going to last more than a couple of days in your household. Happy baking!